Well, at least somebody else came back. So apparently the dates aren't coming up right in Streamlabs either. I'm having issues with it lately. They changed something very subtle. Okay, so hopefully everybody's back. We're gonna go back over to the desktop, see if this actually loaded. So let's first check to see what's going on. So looks like it loaded. So we're gonna go over and see what it looks like on the workbench. I'm actually going to first connect the power. And we'll see what happens. Looks like it's powered up. Let me make sure. Actually, it's not. That was close call. Powered the wrong power supply in it. There we go. So I'm gonna go over to Pronterface and try and open it. Inside Pronterface, we're gonna actually have to check the device. This is just to verify that it's working. So we'll do Device Manager. Inside Device Manager, we'll click on the port. It's port 10, so we'll close out of here. It's not showing up, so we'll have to change it. So we'll connect. And it says connecting printer is now online. So let's move the access and see what happens. So it works. So now what I'm going to do is power down the system for a second and set up something different. So I've disconnected the power. I'm going to disconnect this and just reconnect this. Now I'm going to do it through the display. So I'm going to plug it back in. It's going to beep really loud like it's going to scare me. Let's try moving. It's not moving, so that's not good. So let's check to see if there's anything else in here. So more, back, settings. About. I'm actually looking for the file system settings maybe. Nope. So the settings that I'm looking for is the COM port settings. I'm not seeing them on this display. And of course more is not more. So let's check one thing on the back of this. Let's unplug this, not plug into Wi-Fi, but let's try plugging into this. Go to move. X. Nothing. So we may have to upgrade this. So let's pull the power. This is a very old display, by the way. This might only work on the ramps or the MKS Gen L, in which case I've got to get a new one. So let me just check to see what's going on here. It looks like everybody's back. So MKS Gen L. Let's go to the browser for a second. So inside the browser, let's see if we can find an old display. Let's try TFT. So there's a couple different ones. It says which can be connected for the board, controlled via AUX1, and it's got several languages. That sounds like it. So this looks kind of old, but that's okay. So let's try downloading this. And let's see what it says over here. I'm looking for a version number. Apparently it might not be the version number I'm thinking of, because this display is super old. It's like 3 years old. Well, that's not super old, but apparently according to this it is. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, something tells me we're not using cloud printing. It might have an ARM processor. So we might have just downloaded the wrong thing, because they're not telling us much about it, except E3. So this might be not the right hardware. But let's see what happens. So now that it's downloaded, I'm going to go unzip it. This might turn into a mess, so keep that in mind, because it's been forever and a day. For some reason I'm not seeing the extract, which is awesome. So let's see if we can extract all. Apparently not. Let's check the browser. It might still be downloading. Okay, now it looks like it's extracting. So inside here, what we're trying to figure out is what's going on, and I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. That's why. Sorry, I downloaded it and forgot to put you on desktop. I just extracted it. Inside here, we have a TFT35. So normally on other displays, we have something that's says version 1. So it sounds like they rebooted what they were doing. So these might already be too old, and they're rare files, which means that they're zip files that are different. So this display might get all kinds of fun. So I'm going to extract again. See what happens. And let's go in here. So I guess this is English and this is another language. Or it's pictures. So these are all a bunch of binaries, which makes total sense, right? There's a config file. So I'm thinking I'm not using the right LCD for this. I'm using something very old. So let's go back to the browser. Go into this file and look around. So that's the reverse mirror image. So it's MKS TFT32 version 1, and I have version 4, but mine's MKS TFT32_L. So that might be the mistake. MKS. Let's see, TFT32_L. Awesome. So it looks like they don't support their own stuff. So let's try TFT32. TFT. So this seems to be it. It's probably in here. Yeah, 3 years ago. There we go. So we're getting close. Apparently there's no version 4. So apparently I've got some out-of-date hardware that's almost useless. This is back when I used it on the ramps. So maybe I should order a new one. Let me see what chat thinks. Well, it's kind of quiet in the chat, but apparently the hardware that I'm working with might only work on the older one. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip to the older software and the older hardware and see what happens. And this might explain why I'm totally clueless. So I'm going to go back to the workbench. I'm actually going to disconnect the power, make sure it's disconnected in the wall. And you'll see what I'm about to do. I'm actually going to change steppers because the stepper I'm using is more modern, and the hardware that I'm working with, I don't think you want to see me wiring something up from scratch because I'm not sure what the actual resistors are, and then plugging it all in because that would be kind of messy. But let's change the steppers to something very vintage just so we can see what's going on if it works. So I'm going to leave this here for a second and grab an old board. So here's an MKS Gen L 2. We could probably get away with doing the jumpers on this board, but I'm unsure. So I'm going to use, well, let's try it out. I mean, if it starts to spark, at least we'll have some fun. So I'm going to plug in where I think the jumper goes, and then I'll plug in the actual stepper. So this one actually has the cutout for the stepper, that's why I'm doing it. So there's the enable pin. So I'm assuming, but I'm assuming wrong because they have UART out here. So I probably should look up the manual on this instead of playing around like this, but let's try it out. So let me make sure that doesn't slide around on us. Apparently I'm having fun with my putty over here, not by design. Might be time to replace it. So let me make sure you can see. I'm actually going to move this over. Push that down a little. I'm actually going to connect here, and the reason that I'm setting it up almost the same way hardware wise is because then I only have to change two things and then the way I load it. So I'm going to go back to the port that says AUX 1, put that down there. I'm actually going to power it up for a second. Looks like that works if I turn this correctly. So now I'm going to connect the actual main power. Well, actually I'm going to load the firmware first before we cause any damage. Sorry the light's so bright. So let's go over to VS Code. The only reason I can get away with this is VS Code is very similar for the setup. So we're going to go to source core boards.h, search on MKS Gen L, and we're looking for, whoop, I'm gonna have to change this to Gen. So we're looking for the version 2 of this. So it's down here. So we're gonna copy that. And notice how we're in the Atmega 2560. So this is going to be real easy. We're going to go to configuration. We're going to search on motherboard. We're going to paste it right here. It won't change much except it drops the S. Then we're going to go to platform.io.ini. We're going to remove our changes, so it's Mega 2560 for the chipset, only because I haven't memorized. This is going to be 0. And now we'll load it. So it's going to drop an 8-bit or octal file on the board. And the process is not the same as the binary, it's slightly different. Basically, at the beginning of the file, there's a code that the board recognizes that says put me in load mode. It's one of those things. I'm not going to go into it in depth because it might be a little bit of a bear of a subject. It involves going through data sheets and putting processors possibly in certain modes. So it failed the first time. So let's try it again. And the reason it failed is because it thought it was a different board up here, because the pre-compiled stuff from the previous board is what it was probably running into. So it's created a ELF file, and now it's starting to upload. So basically it's just flashing on the board right now. I'd show you a real quick view. You can see that little flashing. Whoop, sorry. Maybe I was too late. It was actually flashing over in here, but I could reload it to show you. But that's good enough. So I'm going to reconnect the actual stepper. I'm going to disconnect this for a moment and connect the power. It's the exact same way. I'm going to turn my camera back on because it likes to time out. I'm going to tighten that down. Do the same over here with my ferruled connections. So we're connected here. I got to make sure that I have the cord to the right power supply. Plug this in. Then I'm going to plug in the power. I would check to see if it works in prone interface, but you've seen that step. So I'm going to go to Move, X. So it doesn't seem to want to work. So it's really weird because there might be an additional configuration or I've broken a cable. but maybe I have a spare one of these around. So let me look. Okay, here's a really old one. Right now I made a container for it. This is a TFT 28 by the MKS version 3, which means we can upload possibly software to it. I want to see if I have another one here. I don't think it's a touch screen for that one. So let's try that one. Let's power this down. Power it down. Pop this off. Find the aux port. I think it's this one. It's also the right number of pins. So I'll connect it. Let's see if we get it to work. Notice the dust on the part. Let's see what we got here. So, preheat printer, that's not what we're interested in. So we'll go back, go to move. Nothing. So obviously I'm missing a step, or Marlin software doesn't work for 2.0, so we'll try that next. This is going to be a fun one. So I'm going to disconnect here. I'm going to leave that connected. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to do next. So I'm going to go back over to here. I'm going to unload the project. I'm going to go back to the Marlin old firmware. So I'm going to go over to a browser. Apparently someone wants me to buy followers. Hang on, I gotta help them find their way. Apparently I can't easily do it from here, so I'm just gonna ignore them for now. Let me see if I can do it in, well, let's just ignore it. So, let's go over to the browser. Let me make this the size you can actually read it. There we go. Let's go to Marlin fw.org. Go to download. Let's go and grab the old version of the release. This is for 8-bit only. This is going to take a few seconds probably. But let's see what's going on. So let's go to the downloads folder. See if it's actually downloading, because I think it may not have. Oh, there it is. So I'm going to right click, extract all, extract. This will be a lot quicker because it's a lot smaller. It's been a while since I've set this up, so it's going to be interesting. So we have the Marlin folder, and there's another Marlin folder, so we're going to actually just go over to VS Code, open it up, go to downloads, click the first folder, second folder, select subfolder, go to Marlin. Now we've got a different configuration, so this is going to be fun. It's been forever since I've looked at this. It's flatter. So I'm trying to find motherboards, and I used to know how to do this, so it's going to take a second. So let's try hitting M. So there might not be a motherboard file, but there is a pins file we can jump into and see what's going on. Boards.h, that'll help. Notice how they changed the firmwares a lot. So MKS _Gen, and they have the version 2, so let's just copy that. Close out of boards.h. Unfortunately, we got to deal with the whole file being open or folder, so we got to find configuration.h. And obviously my screen is at a slight angle, so it's kind of hard to see. So I'm going to search on motherboard, replace the ramps. It's set to 0 already. Baud rate's fine. We got to set the steppers, so we'll search on, I'm actually going to change the stepper. We'll change it to a DRV8825 because I don't know all of this anymore. So I'm going to search on A4988. Originally in my previous tutorials, this didn't exist. Anything before Marlin 1.1.8, or I'm sorry, 1.1.9, that's what we're currently in, 1.1.9, didn't have all of this. This didn't exist. So if some of my tutorials don't work, it's because they added this. I think I started doing them around 1.6 or 1.1.6 for Marlin. So I'm going to set this to DRV8825. You can see how limited some of the steppers are. I'm going to paste it here. I may have to make changes to the stepper board, so I'm going to have to look this up probably. So let's see what we've got in the browser. So if I go over to the browser, we go back to the website, we're going to search on MKS Gen. I think Gen L will be okay, but it's Gen L 2. Well, it's only showing one, so let's see what we got here. User manual. Here we go. That's helpful. So let's check on here. So what we're looking for is step dir, and it's looking like it's saying for step dir possibly covering these three right here, because that's what the equal sign is. And the Gen L is a different pinout. We're on the Gen L 2, so it's M0, 1 and 2, and I'll show you that real quick. Sorry, I'm abbreviating a little bit today. I'm gonna pop this off for a second, pop this out, pull the jumper, and the jumper that it's talking about is here, and they're not talking about a reset pin, so this is to make the stepping finer. So if you have one stepper, it's like 1/8 of a step. So it's 1/8 of a way, and then it doubles and doubles. I can't remember the exact formula, but we're going to go up to 1/32 of a step by putting in all the jumpers, except for, you know, the ones that don't need to be there. Now I got to grab a stepper. Here's a DRV8825. On the underside, I got to look for EN, which is in that corner, so hopefully we don't smoke the board. So let's plug this back in, plug this back in, so we're good there. Now we got to reload firmware, and I got to remember the process. So inside here, we've got this set. We don't have to set very much more. We do have to make sure that we're at 0, so let's search on motherboard. It's already set to what we need, so let's just try and upload. It might fail the first time, as usual, or not, but it's going to be super quick on this, and I'll show you the board once it starts loading. Or at least I hope it starts loading. It might be slightly different than I expect. There it goes. So on the board, you can see that little flashing light by the USB or serial cable. They're both the same thing. USB is universal serial bus. Okay, it's loaded. So let's go back to the actual display. We'll plug in power. Hopefully nothing bad will happen. We'll connect in here. So we'll go to move. And now it's starting to move. Let's move by 10. So the LCD that I've been showing you with the touchscreen, this is very old technology and I gotta order a newer one or figure out how to set up the other one. So it's not gonna like to go backwards because it thinks it's going forward and doesn't know where the end stop is. But at least we know why the hardware sucks for me, because I apparently have old hardware. I mean, it's a good thing if you want to figure out old hardware. But let me see if I have any other displays that might be useful. This one obviously is not useful. It's got a ribbon cable. Well, I may have found another one, so we could probably go back up through the food chain. Let me see if I have another. Yeah, I do have another, but that one's not going to work well. And I have another, but this is the same version as the first one I showed you. So let me see if I have another display here. I have a modern display maybe. Okay, so let's go back to what was normal. Sorry, I've got a little bit of extra hardware if you haven't noticed. For some reason I don't like to throw it away. This one looks a little old, but I think it's kind of modern. So let's power things down here. This one's very modern, but this was a sample they sent me without an actual potentiometer switch. So it might have been in development when they sent it. I bought a newer one of it, but at present I haven't hooked it up. As you can see, their displays don't change much. Just the solder joints are slightly moved. This one may work, but I don't know. It's very complicated, not really, but looks it. So let's go back to the original configuration. Let me just make sure everything's powered off before I touch anything. So I'm unscrewing these. I'll pop this out of the way in a second. Let me just get this undone. And I'm going to clean up the desk a little just to make it safer. So I'll take the display that I think is super old out. I'll take out the Gen L because that's not useful. And then I'll take out the Gen L again, and then we'll go back to our previous configuration and see if it works. Almost cleaned this up. And I'll check for questions in the chat in a second, because I know that was a long route to a simple question. So let me put this away. Let me put this one back down. Apparently I've got to work on my lighting because it's a little bright. But hopefully the sound's good. I am thinking about upgrading my speaker again. But I have to do some research on that. And I also may change the lighting again, depending upon how good or bad it is. But let me see if I can dial it back. Oh, that's too bright. There we go. That's about as good as I can make it for now. So let me put this back in. Remember, this one's color based, so that's the stepper with the enable pin. I need to reconnect the power. We still have the same firmware on here. Notice how I put colors on here and ferrules for safety. That way I know what I'm connecting and I don't do it backwards on video. Because I actually have an outtake that you guys have never seen where I hooked it up backwards and was pre-recording the video and started talking, and then smoke rose up in my face, and then I realized what I did. So I try and check all my steps before I do anything, but I know where I can do damage and where I don't do damage. So let's hook that up. We're just going to see if it works. So it's auxiliary 1, notch connection. Hopefully this reacts the same. So I'll plug in this. I'll peel this off. Anyways, that's good enough for now. I've actually never used this one, so this is going to be fun. So I'm going to plug it in. Get a little crazy here. I'm going to go to, I guess, settings. Let's see what we got here. Language I don't care about right now. Continue. That's new. File system, Wi-Fi, fan, about, language. So let's go to tools maybe. Move. Sorry, it took me a second to figure out what they're talking about. Okay, nothing's moving. So let's go to the website and figure out how to set this up. It might be a speed issue, so more. Apparently there is no more. Filament leveling, preheat, extrusion, move, home. Oh, that's homing. That's going to be interesting. Let's go back. Settings. Do about. So it's 1.0.3. And then it says Wi-Fi with nothing after it. So it might be a Wi-Fi version. We have system files. Those are the actual drives on the back. Let's see what else we got here. Not much. So we're probably going to upgrade this because I have no clue what I'm doing yet. So let's figure it out. I'll check on the chat in a second. Let me just fix the lighting so it doesn't look horrible. And I'll check the chat. We could talk about Clipper. It's been a while. I've never used it, so I got to figure it out. And generally, I don't like to make too many mistakes. Although tonight's obviously a rare exception. Well, not a rare exception. It's just an interesting night. But Clipper, I don't know enough about. But we can see if we can research it. But let me get this problem first fixed. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this to work, because now I'm curious. And see if we can get this and I want to see what's going on, and you're getting to see me work with stuff that I'm not familiar with, which is fun, or at least funny. So let me bring you over to the browser real quick. I might have a long night of talking, so we'll see. Let's go back to MakerBase. We're going to search on the TFT. In this case, it's TFT 35 version 1. So it's probably going to be in here. So let's see what we got here. Yeah, it looks like it's slightly newer firmware. It's talking about a Cura issue, which I don't think means anything to us. Looks like they had other issues, but they're adding functionality, it looks like. So let's try an upgrade first. So I'm gonna download the code base. It's gonna take a second. And I'll search on Clipper while that's going on. So let's see, Clipper is a 3D printer software. It combines the power of a general purpose computer with one or more microcontrollers. See features documentation for more information on why you should use Clipper. To begin using Clipper, start by installing it. So I want to see documentation first. So frequently asked questions. I have a funny feeling this runs on like a what is it? A Raspberry Pi or something. Yeah, it says Raspberry Pi's microcontroller for details. So let's go back and make some mistakes. So these instructions assume the software will run on a Raspberry Pi in conjunction with an Octoprint. It is recommended that a Raspberry Pi 2, 3, or 4 be used as the host machine. Clipper currently supports a number of ATmel, I think they mean ATmega. So it's saying that it supports 8-bit and 32-bit, because I think ARMS is, or ARM processors are 32-bit. And then BeagleBone, I'm not sure of. Never used it. Start by installing Octopi on Raspberry Pi. Use Octopi version such and such or later. And so it's telling you to install Octopi. And then it's telling you to go to check out a clone. And it's in a folder of a particular person. And then you run a shell script to install it. So I don't know if they're in, it looks like they're installing Octopi, but there's a different way to install Octopi. So these directions kind of make me nervous. This is some kind of build. So this is going to be in depth on a lot of levels. This is all Unix based. So to jump in a Unix in front of everyone might be a little bit unsettling. This is the directory structure. They're talking about port 0. It's a USB port, I guess. Serial, of course. This is saying raise the rights. You're doing a service and you're running it as Clipper. You're stopping it, I guess. And then it's saying something about flashing the device with a make command. And then raise the privileges again. And then service Clipper starts. You're starting back up a daemon. I don't want to get too much into Unix because people look at me funny because it'll change the way or language that I'm talking in. So let's go back over and look at the LCD for a second, and I'll check on the chat. Yeah, I'll have to research this. I'm gonna go way off the reservation if I start talking about Clipper all of a sudden. Obviously, I'm not well versed in it, and most of my audience is used to me talking about Windows. If I start talking about change mod 777 or something like that, they're gonna look at me funny. So I gotta build people up to it. So let's fix the display real quick. So I'm gonna go over to my downloads folder as soon as I figure out where my display is. Okay, inside my downloads folder, I have the TFT master. I'm going to extract it. Yeah, Clipper might be a huge subject. So it looks like I already have something extracted. Let's see if it's the right version. It probably is, and I just don't know what I'm doing because I extracted it like an hour ago. So this size is 3.5. I know we have release. Well, let's go back and look at the release. I think it's 1.06. So if you click here and go to About, that says your version is 1.0.3, so it's very old. So excuse me for not updating my hardware. I'm trying to make this so you can read this. There you go. So inside here we have release 7, which is significantly better. So I'm going to open this folder, open this folder, go to English. It says fonts, pictures. I think what they're trying to say, I'm not going to copy the MKS Wi-Fi bin over, even though it's probably really easy. I just don't have it plugged in. So I'm going to copy these to a thumb drive, being all of this. So let me grab a thumb drive real quick here, or find one first. Okay, I found a thumb drive, but there's nothing in it. So let me find another one. So, give me a second to think this out. So I'm going to grab a thumb drive out of the MKS Gen L version 1 and drop it in here. Because I don't want to hunt for one. So I'll show you what I'm doing. So I just grabbed this drive. It's an 8 gig drive out of my MKS Gen L, or sGen L version 1. Put it in here. I'm going to place it in here if I can do it correctly. Pop it in the computer. Go back over to the computer. Highlight all of this. I'm doing this because they're not outlining the directions, so I'm guessing. So this either will end in a very bad situation or a very good one. But let's check to see. That's the firmware that was there originally. Let me delete that. You probably want to format this as FAT32. It's already formatted in my case. So I'm going to go back. Highlight what I want to work with. Right click. Send it to that drive. Check that drive. It's got it. So now we're going to go back to the desktop or workbench. I'm going to disconnect the power for the board, disconnect the USB. I'm going to take the drive out, pop it in here, and hope for the best. Hopefully I plugged this in right. Okay. Hopefully I can set this up. Whoop, camera went out again, sorry. So this is what I just did. I disconnected all the power. I'm gonna plug in the USB drive here. I'm gonna plug this in. It's gonna load the actual firmware automatically, hopefully. I'm guessing. And we might have to touch the screen. It might be very similar to the Big Tree Tech TFT display. but it says SPI flashing. SPI is usually serial peripheral interface. And it says PIC erasing, so I'm not sure what they're referring to PIC, but it's probably picture in something or it's memory. Where I used to work, they called something the PIC. It was photo image controller. I'm not going to tell you what they renamed it to, not knowing what it meant, but it was digital. So what it's doing right now is it's updating files and binaries. So now it says fonts erasing. I'm guessing SPI is actually memory in this case. It's connected to the serial peripheral interface. So it finished. It's coming back up. Apparently it's coming up maybe in Chinese, but now it's English. So let's go to Tools. Let's go to Home. Let's not go to Home. Let's go back. Settings, About. So we did upgrade the firmware because it's now 7 instead of 3. Let's go back. Let's go to Config. Let's see. Custom Advanced Machine. Machine type, firmware type, baud rate config. That could be useful. So it's 2,500, or I'm sorry, 250,000. I had set it back down. So let's go to here. I'm hoping that's still the same. That should be good. So let's try powering it up and hopefully we won't see any smoke. So I'll plug it back in. Let's see if it actually works. So let's go to Tool, Move, plus. It's not moving still. So we may have to do some more research on this. So let's go over to the computer. So if I go over to the browser and I go back over to the GitHub, see if there's any notes. They're telling you how to build it in VS Code, which is not really useful in this point. See, drivers, middleware, release files. That could have been useful. We didn't get all the way up to this, but let's see if there's directions or a wiki. Project, actions, code, issues. Anything about movement? It might be that we just have to turn it to -1. Let's go back to MakerBase. Let's find the actual display. Probably have to go back this way. Let's see, it's called the MKS TFT35. So that's just firmware. That's not going to help. Is there a wiki? Maybe there's an actual firmware setting in here. Okay, that has to do with chips. Those are processors, I think is what they're talking about. eWarm. Yeah, it's Canon camera. It's a joy after 30 minutes. I know the workaround, but it decreases the video image. I am thinking about changing to a Sony. I just haven't gotten around to getting one. Obviously, it's time too. So let's see. Don't know what that means. Projects, actions. So this is the reason I don't do a lot of tutorials in MakerBase anymore, because finding the documentation can be fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cheat and search on the board and see if there's any clues. So I'm going to go to repositories. It's the MKS Gen L v2. So in here we'll go to firmware. This is an old version, but it looks like that has the display, but it says TS. So that's the other display I have. We could try that out, but I don't want to skip out on this first. So let's go to Marlin, config.h. Let's see if there's any clues in here. So it might be that they're doing this. So we could do 0. We could also change the speed, but I'd just leave the speed the same for the moment. Let's try that first. So I'm going to go back over to VS Code. Inside VS Code, I'm actually going to close this because it's 8-bit. Go back over here, open a folder, go to Downloads, 2.0, 2.0, select folder. We're going to, wait for it to, sorry about that. It likes to load stuff when I load a file. So I'm going to remove the comment. Change that to 0. Change this to -1. I've got to fix the boards.h because that's not right. So it's, I believe, sGen. Let's try cleaning. And let's try changing this to LPC 1769. I'm trying to do this from memory, so I know it might be confusing. I'll clean again. I'll do a check build. This might fail. So far so good. Let me look at the chat. Yeah, Canon's very special. I haven't tried the firmware update. I don't think it's going to fix the problem, but let's try uploading this to the board. Looks like it worked in 2 seconds. So now we got to power cycle everything because that's the way it works. So power off here. Pull the power here. Reconnect the power here. The reason the LCD is working, by the way, and it's trying to reload firmware right now, is I didn't pop out the drive, so it might be set to cur now, so it's ignoring it. But that's the first thing it attempts to do when there's a drive with a binary on it that it recognizes. So we're up to date here. I don't think I changed the speed, but let's go back and check. Speed is still 115, 200. Let's go back over here. Let's try moving this around. So, tool, move. Nothing. 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 Let's make sure I'm connected. Does look like I'm connected. So is there a TFT cable I don't know about? Let's take a look around. There's some jumpers for end stops. That doesn't matter right now. But I don't see a TFT cable connection. So that's awesome. So let me pop this out, go back, we'll check the settings. We'll check the config. Custom. No. Advanced. Apparently that's printer functionality. Baud configuration. That's still the same. So it's maintaining memory. So I am still confused. That's awesome. So we know it works. Let's try disconnecting this. Let's try moving again. This probably won't make any difference. I am connected to the right stepper. The jumper is there. I'm using a fresh Marlin file. So let me plug this back in. And let's do some more research. If anybody's got a suggestion in the chat, I'm open to it. But let me go back and see if I can find anything on their website. So let's search on TFT. So far, nothing. So let's keep searching on it. So it doesn't say anything in here about it except for MKS Robin. So let's search some more. So that's useless. It's not a TFT, so excuse me. It does say TFT on the outside. And we've tried both. So there's got to be something on their website that says how to do this. Let's see, is there a wiki? TFT. It says AUX 1. Serial port to 0. I've already set the baud rate. When testing or using the MKS TFT, MKS Gen L should not be connected with USB cable because serial port conflict. That's awesome. Wonder if that's the issue. So it says serial port, not serial port 1 or 2. So let's see if I screwed up. So let's go back over to VS Code. And I'm going to comment out this line. And I'm going to change this to 0. This is going to cause other issues that we can easily work around. We just have to load manually after this. So I'm going to clean and then I'm going to upload because I think I'm still connected to it via USB serial. So let's see if anybody else caught on to that. Not yet, but let's see what happens. So in a second we have to power everything down. and try this. So 23 seconds. Let's go back over to the desktop. Hopefully the camera won't go out while I'm doing this. Power down the system. We can double check the USB before we pull that. I just want to see what's happening, so I'm going to go to the desktop on my computer. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to make sure that it's loaded, which it is. So let's go back to the workbench. I'm going to pull the power. I'm going to leave it disconnected. I'm going to repower it with just power. Note the flashing light, hopefully for it loading. It's down in the bottom left-hand corner. And let's see if that worked. Tool, move, plus. Okay, so essentially we can't use the USB the way we want. So if you like using your USB like I do, that's your option. So apparently I did make it work. I know that was a long route to a simple question. I'll do a tutorial on it that'll make more sense than me trying to figure it out live. But that's where we go. Sorry it took so long. I'm not familiar with the new display, obviously, but now I'm more familiar. I know how to upgrade it, obviously, now. And I also know how to get it to work. So let's see if we can get the USB to work on a separate port. So let's see what's going on with that. So let me move this over. This is going to be kind of interesting to see if we can get around the problem. So I can't load the firmware the same way anymore, so I have to pop out the power. So as soon as the power's out, I'm going to have to take the drive out because we're no longer able to communicate with it probably because there's a conflict. I'm going to pop this in and I'm going to see if I can reverse the situation where we can use both. Because I don't know when it was developed and if Marlin fixed it. So I'm going to go back over to my desktop on my computer. All I'm going to do is this. I'm going to remove the comment here and change this to -1. So I just reversed around my logic. We'll do a check. And now we got to pull it from here after it builds. So while this is building, I'll check on the chat in a second. It's kind of quiet. You guys can ask questions, you know. Clipper obviously is going to take me more time to find a way to present it in a way that's digestible to most, because for me to just jump right into something without giving a little bit of a history and build up to it is hard for myself and others to understand. So now that we've got that built, we actually have to go to .pio, find it. So it's going to be in here someplace, hopefully, right there. Right click, reveal in Explorer. Right click again, send it to the drive, check the drive, and then go back over to the desktop. Pop out the drive, reconnect it. Hopefully two things will work. I don't think they will, but we'll try. And then I gotta find the power cord and make sure that I got the right one. There we go. So I'm going to plug it in first. It might start flashing. So it's getting power from 5 volts. Now I'm going to power it up. Let's go over to Tool. We'll go to Move. And it doesn't work. Let's disconnect the USB, and it doesn't work. So that was an interesting experience. Apparently they want you to use this as a way to actually communicate. So they've rerouted communication between here and here. So that's why it's harder to set up. And that's one of the reasons I print a lot from either Pronterface or Cura, because I don't want to have to deal with the display. But that's just me. Let's see if we got any questions here. For those that have been doing super chats, thanks a lot. I also have to let you know that I have a couple other announcements. Hopefully tonight or tomorrow, I'll start posting for the Patreons videos they can watch. I created, I think, 11 so far for the SKR 1.2. And it's got some new steppers in there. And then hopefully whenever I get the SKR 2, I'll do the exact same thing. So it'll be like a week or two lag between the Patreon seeing it and everybody else. But I have people that have been Patreons now for a while, and I haven't offered them anything special. And they do supply me with income to bring you these tutorials. And so I need to actually give them something in return. So if you don't know my Patreon address, it's actually down in the description. But you can always tip other ways. I have PayPal and, of course, Super Chats. And I do have a Cash App that I haven't set up yet for people to see. But as soon as I get that sorted out, you'll be able to see that. And I might set up Venmo, but I don't want to overwhelm people. But there are people that are asking, how can I tip you? And so I have to provide ways for them to do that. And other people want to be patrons. And if they're a patron, I kind of have to make something that my patrons want to watch. So there will be a lag between the time that the general public sees stuff and the patrons see it. I just have to finish working on it tonight and part of tomorrow. And I'll probably put a batch of... I want to do all 11 at once so they can see them and then spool them out to everyone else. But I might start with 2 or 3 just to make sure I've got the process down. And then eventually those will spool out to a general audience. I'm partial to the MKS Gen L. You're talking about the Gen L2. It's better than the Gen L1. I like the board only because I've worked with it for a very long time, and it's easier than the Ramps 1.4 as an 8-bit board. The advantage to it is that it's one board instead of 2, so you don't have to plug anything in together. It's also about the same price. And the board layout for the MKS Gen L 2 has a good layout. For the MKS sGen L version 2, which is a 32-bit board, I like that more than the MKS Gen L2. And the reasoning behind that is the MKS Gen L or sGen L has a better amount of bits to work with, and I need to explain this because a lot of people explain it wrong. But an 8-bit processor has 8 spaces in memory that you can store something. A 32-bit has 4 times that. And it's based on a binary number system. So, you know, it goes 0 or 1. That's the first thing. Then you have the next space over, which is 2. So it's 1, 2. So it's doubling. So when you get 32 along, or 2 to the 32nd power, it gives you better accuracy in equations. So if you want to compute like something like pi, it's more precise than an 8-bit processor. Now, when people say a processor is faster, meaning they're talking about 8-bit versus 32-bit, they're talking about clock speed. So that's each clock pulse does a calculation. So the higher the megahertz, the more calculations. So I didn't want to go into that because I don't like talking about hardware because I'm technically not a hardware guy, but I obviously understand what goes on hardware because I work with microprocessors on occasion. Well, not the ones that are pre-configured, but ones I have to build up from scratch, but I don't want to do tutorials on that, so please don't ask. The E3 and the E3D Robin, I haven't used either one of those. I think what you're talking about is the EEPROM, because you're saying 512K flash. It's either that or memory that you're referring to. There may be issues with, I'm not sure which board you're referring to, if it's SKR or if it's, yeah, you might be referring to the SKR, which is Big Tree Tech, but you're saying Robin, so I think they have similar brands. But I think the E3Ds are designed for the Creality Ender 3s, meaning the form factor just drops in over them. And there's probably something to do with fake memory, or they bought something off the market. Yeah, that's what I figured. I had to think about it because they both have E3D in them, being the SKR and the MKS. I noticed when I looked at it again, it said Robin after E3D. I've not used the Robin E3D. I've used the Robin Nano. And so far, I haven't had a lot of issues. Obviously, I haven't worked with the display like this on it, but I'm guessing it's going to be a similar issue. I prefer to connect via Pronterface, which seems ancient to people, but that's what I'm most familiar with, is the serial connection. But I got to get some work done on these tutorials so people can actually see them. There will be, I believe, a SKR Pro version 1.1 coming out tonight. I just have to get the thumbnail done and do some minor editing. And then there'll be a bunch of tutorials that'll be up on Patreon first. And then those will spool out one a week from there. And then also I'll be doing the same thing, hopefully when the SKR version 2 arrives. That hasn't arrived yet, so it's going to be a day or two. It's literally in the United States someplace. But I'll also be covering that, and I'll also be covering older stuff like the GTR stuff that I kind of put down for a while. I'll be covering more steppers and probably go more in depth into other subjects. Unfortunately, the harder tutorials for me to do live are BL Touch and 3D Touch. And the reason is I need a full printer to show you it, not just a rail. And that's unfortunately going to have to be a pre-recorded one until I can get this set up to actually move on its own. But I haven't gotten around to redesigning it yet, but that's coming next. Yeah, I usually talk about both boards. I also talk about ramps a lot. That's what I started on. I actually have, I think, 8 or 10 ramps boards in various printers. It's only when I expanded to 32-bit when people asked for it that I covered it. Initially I was a little wary, but it seems a little bit easier to work with. So I'll let everybody go. I've been trying to talk for 2 hours, even though I accidentally stopped the video midway through when I tried to switch scenes. I hope it doesn't happen again. And let me turn the camera back on. And hopefully I'll replace the camera so you don't have to keep seeing that. So everyone take care, be safe, remember to get your shots if you can. And I'll catch up with you tomorrow around 3 o'clock.